Hi, fifth grade. This is Miss Harvey, and today we are going to be doing math review together. Today is Wednesday, April 29th. To be prepared for math review today, you should have opened up your document for Wednesday, April 29th. You should have a piece of scratch paper with you and a writing utensil. Go ahead and grab those materials and come back to the video when you're ready to go. So for today's work, you're going to go ahead and solve all of the problems independently first and come back to this video when you are ready to share your answers and check your answers to see how you did. So go ahead and do all of the problems. Come back to the video when you are done. Pause the video here and do that now. So you should only be back to this video if you have finished solving all of the problems on your own. If you did not solve all of them on your own, then you should pause the video again and do that. For today, the first strategy that we are going to go over is subtracting mixed numbers. So our first problem was 14 and 4/10 minus 13 and 1/3. When we're subtracting mixed numbers, what do we need to make sure is true about our denominators? Right, we need to make sure that we have common denominators in order to subtract mixed numbers, or we're not actually able to do the subtraction. So here we were given lots of problems where the denominators were different, and before we solved the actual subtraction, we needed to find a common denominator first. Let's go ahead and look at the first problem and how I solved. So we started off with our number sentence, which I rewrote here. Again, I noticed that tenths and thirds were not the same unit. I needed to think of a common multiple that 10 and 3 share. If I skip count by 10 and I skip count by 3, both will land on 30. So I decided to use the common denominator of 30ths. To show my common denominator work, I multiplied the fractions by a form of 1. 4/10 times 3/3 equals 12/30. 12/30 and 4/10 are equivalent because I multiply by a form of 1, which is the same as multiplying by 1. Anything times 1 gives you the same value. For 1/3, I multiplied by 10/10 to get 10/30. And then I set my number sentence back up as an algorithm so that I could do the subtraction. 14 and 12/30 minus 13 and 10/30. First, I work my way through the fraction subtraction. So I do 12/30 minus 10/30 equals 2/30. And then I do the whole numbers, and 14 minus 13 is 1. So my final answer should be 1 and 2/30. Now I want you to double check your work for number 2 before we discuss it together. 19 and 7/12 minus 19 and 1/5. Go back to your work and double check using the strategy that we just talked about, and then come back to the video to see if you're doing it correctly. Pause the video here to do that now. For the next problem, I follow the same format to solve. First, I noticed that my units were not the same, so I know I needed to come up with a common denominator. And I used 60ths. 7/12 times 5/5 equals 35/60ths. And 1/5 times 12/12 equals 12/60ths. Then I set up my subtraction number sentence as an algorithm. 19 and 35/60ths minus 19 and 12/60ths. I start with the smaller place value, which are my fractions. 35/60ths minus 12/60ths is 23/60ths. And 19 minus 19 is 0. So my final answer should be 23/60ths. The next few problems practice the same strategy that we just went over. So here, I want you to pause the video to check your work against mine, and if you notice any mistakes in your work, you should go back and revise them so that you're prepared for the exit ticket. Again, for number 11, 17 and 5/6 minus 1 and 3/5, you should check your work against mine by pausing the video and seeing if your work matches mine. If it doesn't, then you should revise. For the last subtracting mixed number problem, we're actually going to go over it together. 9 and 1/5 minus 5 and 4/6. What common denominator did you choose to use here? I chose to use 60ths. I chose to use 30ths. So, in order to get my denominator to be 30 for both fractions, I multiplied 1/5 times 6/6 to get 6/30ths. Then I multiplied 4/6 times 5/5 to get 20/30ths. When I set up my new subtraction number sentence, I had 9 and 6/30ths minus 5 and 20/30ths. So of course I need to start by subtracting the fractions. I needed to do 6/30ths minus 20/30ths. What problem do you think I ran into when I tried to do that subtraction? Exactly. You cannot take away 20/30ths from 6/30ths. 20 is larger than 6, so doing that subtraction is not possible. I need to regroup from the next place value, similar to how I do when I'm doing subtraction with whole numbers. So I regrouped from the ones place, and the 9 became an 8. Now I needed to add my whole to my fraction so that I would be able to do the subtraction. Here, I need to add my whole as a form of 1. Because if I add it as the number 1 whole, I'm going to have the same problem. I still won't be able to subtract 6/30ths and 20/30ths. So I added my whole as a form of 1, 30/30ths. When I do 6/30ths plus 30/30ths, I end up with 36/30ths. Now I'm able to subtract 20/30ths from 36/30ths, and that gives me 16/30ths. Then I will do 8 minus 5, and that gets me 3. So my final answer here should be 3 and 16/30ths. When you're doing subtraction with mixed numbers and you're not able to subtract your fractions, you should regroup from your whole. And when you regroup from the whole, you'll add that whole back in to your fraction as a form of 1. The form of 1 that you use depends on what your denominator is. So you should use a form of 1 that allows you to add your fractions. For the next problem, you're going to check your work against mine by pausing the video and comparing your work to mine and your strategies to mine. If you notice that you did not get the correct answer or that you are not using the correct strategies, you should go back and revise your work so that you're prepared for your exit ticket quiz. Today's secret code for your Math Review exit ticket quiz is MARKER. 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 Today's exit ticket secret code is MARKER. MARKER. The last problem that we're going to go over together asks us to determine where or which letter on the number line below represents the fraction 4/6. We were given a number line with a couple of hash marks and the numbers 0, 1, and 2 labeled. The other hash marks are labeled with letters, but they do not have numbers responding to them. It's our job to be able to label these hash marks using what we know about fractions and number lines. So, first, let's take a look at the distance between 0 and 1. How many parts was this whole broken into? For example, if I were to draw a bar model between 0 and 1, based on the hatch marks that are already on the number line, how many parts is this whole broken into? Well, there are 2 hatch marks between 0 and 1, and so that means that this whole is broken into 3 parts. If they're broken into 3 parts, how much is each part worth? Exactly, each part is worth 1/3. So now we're able to label those hatch marks. What fraction should I label A as? Right? It would be 1/3. What fraction should I label B as? 1/3 plus 1/3 is 2/3. And 2/3 plus another third is 3/3, which is the same thing as 1/2. Next, let's use the same strategy for labeling the hatch marks between 1 and 2. If I were to draw a bar between 1 and 2 that represents 1/2, based on the hatch marks that are already on our number line, how many parts should I break this whole into? Exactly, it would be broken into 3 different parts, meaning that we're counting by thirds. So I want you to tell me, what would I label hatch mark C? Correct, it would be 1 and 1/3. What would I label hatch mark D? Correct, it would be 1 and 2/3. And 2 wholes is the same as 1 and 3/3. So now that we have all of our hatch marks labeled, we're better able to figure out which of these fractions is equivalent to 4/6. So none of our hatch marks are labeled as 6. We were counting by thirds on this number line. So to figure this out, we have to think about equivalent fractions. So we need to figure out which of these fractions would be equivalent to 4/6. And we can figure that out by multiplying by a form of 1 to make these denominators into 6. So I want you to do that on your paper right now. Multiply the fractions that we labeled by a form of 1 in order to have a denominator as 6. And figure out which of these fractions is equivalent to 4/6. You should have found that 2/3 times 2/2 equals 4/6, proving that point B represents 4/6 because 2/3 is equivalent to 4/6. That's the end of our Math Review lesson for today. Right now, you should be determining for yourself whether or not you feel confident to go on to your exit ticket, or if you need to check in with your teacher for a conference. And then you should do whatever fits best for you. Once you've decided, go ahead and either reach out to your teacher for a conference or take the Math Review exit ticket quiz for today to get your grade.